So, in this time, how can we make our communication better and more complete? Hey guys, happy Friday. Welcome back to Fearless Fridays. Today is Friday, June 26th. This is episode 59 of Fearless Fridays. Happy Friday, happy summer, happy Juneteenth from last week. And welcome to the show. If it's your first time watching, thank you so much for watching. If you are a return watcher, I welcome you back and I thank you so much for returning. So this is something that I've been thinking about a lot, especially with everything that's going on right now. Social unrest, racial division, racially charged conversations that are happening right now, just in the world, but also in the United States specifically. And this is something that I've thought about a lot in the past, and that is how can we make our communication more complete and beneficial for everyone? As we were in this time of social unrest and it seems like revolution is happening, which is awesome. I think a lot of us welcome that. But what's happening is a lot of people are finally feeling free and bold enough and courageous enough to tell their stories and to share things that have happened to them and to share specifically stories of, racial discrimination and straight up blatant racism and all kinds of things. We're seeing stories on social media, we're seeing videos, and people are sharing. And I think that's an amazing thing. For one, it's a courageous thing. It takes a lot of courage to share things that are difficult to share, especially when you don't know how people are going to respond or react to it. But I think on the one side, you have the people who are being courageous enough to share. And then on the other side, you have the people who are charged with listening. And I think one of the ways that we can make our communication more complete and more beneficial for all of us is if we being whoever is charged with listening in that moment, actually listens to the story and doesn't listen to respond, doesn't listen to discount, doesn't listen to diminish, but listens to understand, listens to give that person an opportunity to share and to be heard fully and completely. And I think we're all kind of guilty of this, myself included. I'm not counting myself out. I'm not, dismissing myself from this. But I think a lot of times when we hear things that happen to people and maybe they're horrific or maybe they're hurtful or maybe they're sad or whatever, and we try to find the bright side. We want to look on the bright side and we want to maybe give the other person on the other side of that story the benefit of the doubt, or we want to say, well, I'm sure it wasn't that bad, or I'm sure that person had a good reason for doing that to you or whatever. But what that does is that completely diminishes the power and the courage that it took for the person to tell their story. And it diminishes the story because what it says is, I know that bad thing happened to you. I know that horrible thing happened to you and I know it was hurtful, but I'm sure there's a really good reason for it. And a lot of times we're trying to reason things that are unreasonable. We're trying to make sense of things that don't make sense. We're trying to make things okay that aren't okay because it makes us, the listeners, feel more comfortable. It makes us feel safer because we don't have to deal with the darkness of that reality, if that reality is true. We don't have to deal with the reality of that situation. And I think that's really unfair to the people or the person who has decided to share, something that was hurtful, that was harmful, that was maybe even horrific or damaging to them. And so I think we have to be mindful of having complete communication and be mindful of having communication that is going to be beneficial to everyone. And it being beneficial to you doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to like what you hear. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to feel good. But to hear the truth, whether it feels good or not, is always going to be beneficial. Truth is always going to be beneficial, even if you don't want to hear it, because the only way you can make a change for the better is if you hear a truth that's maybe inconvenient or maybe that hurts you, or maybe that breaks your heart. That's the only way to get to a better situation, is to hear the truth, to know the truth, to live in truth. That's literally the only way to get better. So, especially to get better at communication. So I think one thing that we can learn in this time, and one thing that we can all work towards and strive towards, is complete and beneficial communication. And what that means is to allow people to tell their story. Don't discount their story. Don't discount the truth. Don't allow yourself to be the person who diminishes the importance or the power of someone else's story. People are being courageous in this time. People are knocking fear in the face, which I applaud completely. People are telling their truth. Sometimes the truth is hard to tell. You tell it and your voice shakes, or you cry, or whatever. It's hard to tell and it's hard to hear. But the only way you can get to healing is if you get to the other side of that hurt. And sometimes the only way to get to the other side of that hurt is to tell the truth that's hard to tell, or to listen to a truth that's hard to hear. So that's my challenge for myself, and also my challenge for anyone who is watching and listening, especially in this time. There are a lot of people, I think all of us are in some way telling truth. And right now we're dealing with a lot of racially charged situations that have happened historically in this country, situations that have happened to each of us individually. And if you're a person who's never experienced that, if you're a person who's never experienced racism firsthand, or you've never been the victim of racially charged situations, then you don't know what that is. And when someone chooses to share that with you, you have to honor their courage. You have to honor the situation. You have to honor that person by being willing to listen and take it in. And even if it's hurtful to hear, even if it's disturbing to hear, not immediately figure out a way to make it reasonable. Because let's be honest, racial discrimination, racism is not reasonable. There's nothing reasonable about racism. So you can't make it reasonable. You can't make it make sense, because it's nonsensical. It doesn't make sense. So if someone is telling you their experience with racism, if someone is sharing their experience with you, don't minimize it. Don't diminish it. Don't try to compare it to something else that has happened to you that is not racism. That's not helping. You have to listen. You have to be willing to take it in. You have to be willing to hear it, even if it hurts, even if it breaks your heart. Because guess what? If it breaks your heart and you didn't experience it, imagine the heart of the person who did experience it. Their heart is even more broken than yours, because they actually had to live through it. They actually went through it. So think about that. Think about that. Think about how you're engaging people when they are telling you their story. Think about how you're engaging people when they're telling you what they've experienced, whether it be racial discrimination, racism, sexism. You know, I think we've also seen this with the Me Too movement, where women were coming out and telling stories that they had been afraid to tell for so long because they feared that no one would believe them. And so my charge is, don't be the person who doesn't believe just because you don't get it. Don't be the person who doesn't believe just because you've never seen it. Don't be the person who doesn't believe just because it's never happened to you. Don't be the person who doesn't believe because believing is hard or is hurtful. Because if believing is hard and hurtful, experiencing it is even harder and even more hurtful. So I hope that makes sense. Let's just listen and allow people to tell their stories, and to allow people to share honestly and be empathetic, try to put ourselves in their shoes, rather than find a way to explain it away or make it reasonable. Because that doesn't help. It doesn't help. So that's what I want to share with you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that blessed you. Please don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube, and share this video with someone if you think it might help them in some way. Also, comment below if you have comments or questions or queries or whatever. I always love a conversation, so I'm always open to that. But in everything you do, remember, fear is stupid. Get out in the world, live, love, go to be. Tell your truth. Don't be afraid to tell your truth. And don't be afraid to listen and to receive it and to take it in. I'll talk to you guys next week. Bye.